Hey guys, welcome to your fourth tutorial on learning how to program. Today we'll be talking about loops. So the loops I want to cover in this video are the while loop, the do while loop, and the for loop. So let's go ahead and look at a situation where you'd want to use a loop. So say just for some reason in your program you want to print out the values 1 through 5 to the console. Well, instead of actually writing out all those print lines, the system.out.print lines, what you could do is you could just use a loop and have that pretty much automated for you. So let's look at how to do that with a while loop. So let's go ahead and just make our count variable, and we'll initialize that count to 1. So for the while loop, the way this is set up is you write 2 parentheses, and in these parentheses is going to be the condition for the loop. I'll talk about that more in just a second. And then you have these brackets, these curly braces, and this signifies the body of the loop. So whenever this condition is true, then we're going to execute the body. If this condition is false, then we're going to skip the body and just go on to the rest of our program. So the condition for the loop, so we want to print out the values 1 through 5. So since we're going to start off with our count's going to start off at 1, let's just go ahead and say while our count is less than or equal to 5. So as long as this statement is true, or while this statement is true, then we're going to execute the body of our loop. So we can write our system.out.print line and say count. So what this is going to do is, I'm just going to go ahead and run this just so you can see. Now this is an example of an infinite loop, and this is a bad programming practice. You want to stay away from infinite loops as possible, or as much as possible. You always want to, have your loops some way to exit the loop so you're not stuck in an infinite loop. And let's go ahead and stop this. Now what we can do is we need to make sure that this condition is going to return false at some point. So, and I guess the way we have it set up, the only way that this is going to return false is when count is greater than 5. Well, let's go ahead and increment count. And if you remember from the previous video I talked about the compound assignment operator, and we're just going to go ahead and use that. So now if we run this, now we can see that we have 1 through 5 printed to the console. So the way this loop works is, so we start off by having our variable, right? We initialize a variable to 1. This isn't part of the loop. This is just something extra I did because we need this for the loop. So we started off by making our variable. And then for the while loop, we start off with a condition. So the while loops, it evaluates the condition, and if that condition is true, then it'll execute whatever's in the body. If it's false, then we skip the body and go on with the rest of our program. So in this case, count, it evaluates to see is count less than or equal to 5? If so, then we want to print count out to the console, and then we're going to increment count. So the second time we go through here, after we increment it right here, count will be 2, and then it's true because 2 is less than or equal to 5, and we execute the body and increment count again, and so on and so forth, until count gets to be 6, and then we check to see, is count less than or equal to 5? Well, no, it's false because 6 is greater than 5, so now we can exit the loop, and as you can see down here, we have 1 through 5 printed out. Now, this is really all a while loop is, but I'm just going to show you a trick that you can do. So instead of saying plus equals 1 or count gets count plus 1, what you can do is you can just use the increment operator for that. And the increment operator looks like that. So just 2 plus signs, and what this is doing is this is just going to increment this variable by 1. There's also the decrement operator, which is just 2 minus signs, and this will it'll just subtract 1 from the variable. Also, with these increment and decrement operators, if you write it at the end of a variable, this is called a postfix increment, or if you're using a decrement operator, it's a postfix decrement. And you can also write these increment or decrement operators in front of the variable, and this is called a prefix increment or a prefix decrement. Now there are some different behaviors associated with doing a postfix versus a prefix increment or decrement, but so I'm just going to leave it like that, and I'm just going to show you the difference. So in this print line, I'm just going to do a postfix increment. And when we run it, as you can see, we still get 1 through 5 down here at the bottom. But now, this is where the magic happens. Let's go with a prefix increment. And when we run this, you can see we get 2 through 6. So what exactly is happening here? Well, let's go ahead and take a look. So we start off by evaluating our condition. So is 1 less than or equal to 5? Yes. So let's execute the body. And then we come down here to this print line. So inside this print line, we hit this increment operator attached to the variable. So with this prefix increment operator, or prefix increment, it's actually going to increment the value, the variable first, and then we print it out. Whereas if we did it with a postfix like this, it'll print the value out first, and then it'll increment the variable. And then, we continue on a loop, so on and so forth. So that's the main difference between a prefix and a postfix, is that a prefix will increment the variable first, and then your variable will be used for whatever you need it to. With a postfix, it'll be incremented after you use your variable. So just keep that in mind. But just for readability's sake, I'm going to leave it with the count being incremented on its own line. And let's move on to the next loop. So I'm just going to comment this loop out. And to easily comment out multiple lines, all you need to do is hit Control /, and that'll comment out those selected lines. And let's move on to the do loop. So the do loop is actually really similar to the while loop, because it actually uses a while loop in it. I guess if you'll understand in just a couple seconds. So the while loop right here, inside these parentheses, this is where the condition is, and then between these two brackets, or curly brackets, this is where the body is. So let's write our condition again. So count is less than or equal to 5. Oh, my bad. We also need to initialize and declare a variable. So int count equals 1. And now the main difference between a do while loop and a while loop is that the body of a do while loop will be executed at least one time, no matter what. So whereas a while loop, it'll check the condition first. So a while loop may not even be executed, whereas a do while loop, the body will be executed at least once. So let's go ahead and write syso, and let's print out our count. And then we want to increment our count. And as you can see, don't forget our semicolon. And as you can see, that when we run this, we still get 1 through 5. So as I said before, we execute the body first, and then we evaluate the condition. And if that condition's true, then we re-execute the body again, and then evaluate the condition, and so on and so forth until the condition's false. So that's a do while loop. Let's go ahead and look at a for loop. So a for loop is kind of set up differently from the while and do while loops. It has actually 3 parts to it. So the way you write it is for, and then these parentheses. And then there's 3 parts to this. The first part is called the initialization, and this is where we make our variable that's going to, I guess, manage the loop. So it's going to maintain the loop. So let's go ahead and write count is equal to 1, or count gets 1. And then the second part is called the condition, and this is where we want to say, well, count is less than or equal to 5. And then finally the third part is the increment, and this is where we can say count plus plus, and then we write the body of the for loop underneath it like this. So let me just go ahead and fill in the body really quick, and we want to print out count, and that's all we need. So let me run this just to show you that this is going to work. And we have 1 through 5. And the way this for loop works is we start off by creating our variable, and then we evaluate the condition. So we have count, and it has a value of 1. Now we evaluate the statement of count is less than or equal to 5. In this case, 1 is less than or equal to 5, so this is true. So we execute the body of our loop. And what we're doing here is we're just going to print out the value of count, and then we move up here to increment our variable, and then we check the condition again, and if that's true, then we're going to execute the body, and then once we execute the body, we increment again, and so on and so forth until that condition is false. So that's all for loop. So if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave a comment below, or you can email us at brotorials@gmail.com. So thanks for watching, guys.